Welcome back, guys. Today I'm going to improve my existing web chat application by introducing configuration files in the React frontend and the Java backend. This will help simplify this application by removing hard-coded values in the app. So let's get started. In the React app, you'll actually notice that I have this .env file that already has some values in place. Right now, these are not being referenced at all in the application, but I'm going to do so right now. And this will be helpful because I have a lot of hard-coded URLs or say text in the code to the backend. So if you look at this about us, you'll see that there's this keycloak based URL referencing localhost 8081. If you look at this chat application, you can see there's a bunch of HTTP requests that it does to the backend, the Java code I should say, which is referencing the Apache server's localhost port 8080. So we can go ahead and remove this and put the React a variable that is defined in the react.env file. So let's go ahead and open up the env file. And a lot that I have here actually looks good that I won't modify. So these first three are basically the React, I should say the keycloak endpoints that I have. So just where keycloak is running on, which is localhost, the realm, and the chat, or I should say client ID. So what I'm going to do now is actually modify this logout URL. I'm going to go ahead and just remove the endpoint over here where it has it redirect URI. I'm going to leave that in place, and I'm going to get the other end of this. Okay, let me go ahead and create another variable here. And this one here is going to be replacing those hard-coded endpoints that I have here. So that's what we're going to use that for. But let's go ahead and add a couple of more. And these two, I'll show you where I'm going to be putting this in the code soon. So now with this set up, let's go ahead and replace the first hard-coded variable. So if we go to the About Us, you can see there's a keycloak based URL, which is referencing this localhost port 8081/auth. So you can see that we actually have that defined as this parameter here, React App API keycloak URL. And the way you reference this into the code is by typing in this process.env and then the variable name. So now what's in this env file is going to be placed into this keycloak based URL variable. Now the next thing we're going to actually update is if we go to the chat page JSX file, you'll again see all of these hard-coded localhost port 8080 endpoints for all of these HTTP requests. We are going to replace that with the endpoint that I have over here, which is the React App API Java Backend base URL. So just like above, we're basically going to replace the string text with process.env.this text here. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do this for the remaining 6, 7 over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and just copy paste. Now there's several other files that I have that have this hard-coded base URL for the endpoint to the Java backend. I'm going to go ahead and do those quickly, but I'll skip it for now in the video, but you can see it in the code changes afterwards. So you can see I did that over here with the invite accepted. I'm going to do it to here in the event invite friend with this web app endpoint. And I think that's it with respect to this specific variable in the env file. But now let's go ahead and do something else and replace other hard-coded variables. So let's go to the index.js file, which again has the URL here for the keycloak endpoint. And again, I have the realm and the client ID. You can see that I actually have that defined over here as these variables. So let's go ahead and replace what's hard-coded with these variables here, okay? So once again, basically we're just going to be replacing this with the process.env.variable name. Same thing with the realm here. And the client ID. Now, there's still a couple other variables that I have over here that I have to replace a hard-coded code in. So I'm going to basically skip over here. I'm going to go ahead and make those changes, but I'm going to show you once the changes are done. But the changes that I'm going to be doing now are going to relate to essentially this logout URL and the React app self URL and these two other variables here. So let me go ahead and make the quick changes and then I'll show you as soon as I'm done. So you can see here in the main page.jsx, I replaced the redirect URI, which had the old hard-coded base endpoint of the application, and now I replace it with this process.env.react_app_self URL. Okay, the next thing I changed is in this main app URL or main app JSX file. You can see I had this logout URL which had this hard-coded text here, which is now replaced by these two variables, the React app logout URL and the React app self URL. This is set to HTTP localhost 3000, and this one over here is set to the rest of this text. So now with this in place, we can go ahead and remove this initial hard-coded variable, and that should handle that. In the invite_friend.jsx file, I did replace the keycloak base URL with what's in the env file instead of the hard-coded text. And in here, I replaced what was the hard-coded localhost -3000 with this environment variable, which is referencing the same thing. I also made the change over here as well. You can see I replaced some hard-coded text with these environment variables. And in the invite accepted, you can see I did the change here also to environment variable. And if I go to the very beginning, I also made this additional change as well. And in the chat page.jsx file, you can see I made a few other changes as well. Over here, here, and you can see here, I also did this, and this is replacing the what was hard-coded values with these other variables here, which are these two right here. Also, I realized that my initial draft, I did have this my keycloak.js file, which is something that's actually not needed. This was actually referencing the endpoints to the keycloak and the realm and client ID. But as you recall, this is actually already defined in the index.js file. So this file, I'm just going to go ahead and delete and also update the code that references this to use the keycloak object defined in index.js. So that is actually going to be done in the invite accepted. As you can see, it actually has a reference to this keycloak object. And I'm going to go ahead and also update references to that to use, again, the index.js keycloak instance, which is going to be passed as a prop to the child components. So basically I'm going to uncomment this line here, and I'm going to actually reference the local class instance to be just app keycloak, and it's going to be equal to the keycloak object that's going to be passed in as a prop to invite accepted. Now anywhere that I actually have a reference to just a keycloak object is now going to be replaced with this.state.appKeycloak. So I can just do a general like search and replace, but I just want to show you here first. So this was actually referencing what was in that JS file that I deleted, but now this is going to be replaced with this.state.appKeycloak. And I'm going to go ahead and do this for the rest. So I'm not going to show that, but you can do that in your copy if you have this code, okay? Okay, just did a replace for that, and you can see there's a bunch of lines here that are modified, and you can see that the lines include the this.state.appKeycloak, and if you click here you can see that this was just referencing the keycloak.id, or just a keycloak object that was passed in, that was put in as an import that is now no longer there. Now I think the last thing I want to do is make sure that this component, which is referenced in main app, actually has that keycloak object passed in as a prop. So if we go to the main app and we go to where invite accepted is referenced here, you can see that the only thing passed in as a prop is the logout URL. But if you actually look other components here, you can see that there's a this.props.parent keycloak, which is passed in referencing keycloak object. So we're going to go ahead and just copy this from above, and we're going to put that into invite accepted. So now the parent keycloak object that's going to be defined in index.js is now going to be available to the invite accepted, and the invite accepted is going to be assigning that prop to app keycloak. And I noticed one little thing here. I did a mistake. This was probably with respect to my search and replace. Let me go ahead and fix this 1 second, guys. Okay, this was a keycloak based URL, so let's go ahead and put this back as it was. This one here is, what was this here? Props.keycloak. And then replace this here with a comma instead of a period. Okay, I think that might look okay. Let's see what the front end says here. Oh, okay, so I grouped something else over here. So let me go ahead and double check that real quick. Okay, notice a quick issue here. This was actually, again, typoed here. It was props keycloak. It should be props.keycloak, and the parent or prop passed in is keycloak object. Because if I go back into main app, you'll see that keycloak object is the name of the prop passed in. Okay, that part was it. So it was just that little fix that I had to do. I did have to restart by doing npm install and do npm start, but now it looks like it's all good again. So you can see I can log in here, I can see my saved group chats. If I click on it, I can actually get my chat history. So the React application has now been updated to use the .env file. Lots of minor little changes, replacing hard-coded endpoints with what's in the env file. I also did a refactor by removing my keycloak.js file from the inviteAccepted.jsx and replacing the references to the keycloak object from that import to use the class variable app keycloak, which is set to the keycloak object passed in. So far so good. Okay, so now to the Java backend, where we're going to replace some hard-coded values with some configuration parameters. But before I go ahead and do that, I'm going to go ahead and update the context.xml file here, or just point out the fact that now I'm actually referencing a Postgres server that's on my local host machine. Before I didn't show this because it was actually pointing to an AWS RDS instance, and I didn't want to show the actual endpoint and user credentials. But now I am running it also on a local host, or basically my VirtualBox Ubuntu instance, and I have this information here. So where the configuration files parameters come into play is I'm going to be putting that into the web.xml file. And what I'm going to do is actually update the invite request.java file to reference this. And what I mean by that is that the invite request.java file actually has a few, let's see, when it calls the email functionality, there is some hard-coded stuff within the email class itself. So if I go to the email class, you can see that there's going to be, let's see here, hard-coded stuff with respect to like the endpoint, or should I say the SMTP username, the actual SMTP endpoint that we have in AWS. And so that stuff we're going to be replacing with data that's going to be config parameters within the web.xml. So to do that, let's go ahead into web.xml and let's go within the invite request servlet, which is right over here. And what we're going to do is actually add a few init parameters. We're going to close out this init parameter, and we're going to define the name, and we're going to define the actual value. So basically this parameter is going to be used as part of the SMTP email that's going to be sent out, and this is going to be whenever the user sends an invite request to somebody, this is going to be like the from where it's going to come from. And ideally this would be like an email address or no reply from like your domain from whatever website that you're hosted. But in this case, I can just put like abcd.@testemail.com, and I'm going to create a few more parameters here. So let's just go ahead and copy this. Next one's going to be the SMTP endpoint. And you're going to replace this with your SMTP endpoint. Now the AWS region. And you're going to replace this with the AWS region. And this is with respect to the secrets API that you're going to be doing, because there is the credentials to access the SMTP service from AWS does require username and password, and that's something that's stored as a secret in AWS Secrets Manager. And to access that in your code, you need to specify the region you're in, and of course the actual secret name. So this is just temporary text here that I have that I'll fill in with my own actual data, but I'll do that off screen. Okay guys, I pushed the values off screen with the actual ones that I need, but before I actually show how to use this in the code, we can do actually a global environment variable simply by just adding this env entry field here. And this is not tied down to any specific server, so this is going to be a global. And it's going to take three types here, three additional brackets. Okay, so this is going to be the name of this environment variable, which is going to be just called app environment. You got to specify the type, whether this is a string or boolean. This is going to be simply a string, and then the actual value itself. And the way that you would actually invoke this in the code is by essentially doing this here. And I'm going to actually do it in the code so you can see as well. So now we have configuration parameters set for the servlet itself, and we actually have global environment variable defined over here. So this global environment variable, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go inside the get latest messages. So this could go anywhere, but since this one gets called periodically, I do want to put it here. So right above here, let's just go ahead and let me copy what I put in that web.xml. This is part of the Java code that's going to be needed to extract this. And let's go ahead and assign this to a local variable. And we're going to just simply log the environment as such. So that's how you actually extract and use anything that's in the environment entry tags in your web.xml. And now the next thing that we want to do is update the invite request to actually extract the values from the init parameters that we did before. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is show you how to do that. So I'm going to do the SMP local variable endpoint, and this is going to be set to SMP endpoint. And I did have 3 other variables that was assigned to this servlet, and let me go ahead and extract those as well. Email from email, and just to save time, we just go ahead and copy and paste. We're going to get the AWS region and the AWS secret name. And what we're going to do, we're going to pass all of these into the email object over here in the parameter, or I should say the constructor. So let's go ahead and just pass it in. And of course, we're going to have to update the constructor for this email class. So let's go over here. And let's go ahead and add those. I'm going to create a couple of class public or private variables over here that's going to be used to store some of these values. So let me just go ahead and create a local class variable AWS region. And look for secret. Okay, so that is looking good so far. And now if we go to the send email, you can see over here, here's where we actually get the secrets from the AWS Secret Manager. And again, the username and password was actually hard-coded in here. So now we're going to go ahead and change that, and we're going to pass in the region and the AWS secret that we just passed into the email object, which again, this means we're going to have to update the actual get secret method call within a secrets.java file. So if we go over here, let's go ahead and update this. We're going to add the parameters for the AWS region and the AWS secret. And so now we have these 2 temporary variables here locally that are now going to be set to the parameters passed in. And you can see that these are actually being used in the API used to connect to AWS Secret Manager. You can see the region here, and then the actual secret name is used a little bit below. Notice there's a quick little typo over here. So in the constructor, put stmp. It should be smtp. And we can see now that it builds and compiles correctly. So let me go ahead and run this in debug. And I'm going to put a breakpoint into the get latest messages. Oh, so hold on. Let me look into this quick issue over here. Okay, everything was fine. I just restarted the server. This might be a little NetBeans cache issue here, but there's nothing wrong with this, so you can ignore that for now. But let's go ahead and put a breakpoint over here by the environment variable, just to show you exactly that it's actually able to extract what it is intending to extract. You can see the breakpoints hit over here, and the environment is actually set to the string of test. And if you go back to the web.xml, you can see that the actual value over here is test, and is referencing it by the actual name, app environment, and it is a string type, which is exactly what we are doing and parsing it out. So that is looking good. So let's skip over that. And if we go to the invite request over here, you're going to see that we actually have these variables again. So let's just say these are parameters set to specifically for this servlet invite request. So let's go ahead and just hit a breakpoint over here. And this is not going to get hit unless we actually send an invite request. So let's go here to the React application, go to invite. Let's just send a bogus request to a non-existent email. So and let's just submit. And you're going to see it's going to hit these breakpoints, and you're going to see it's going to extract the values for each of these. So let me just kind of just scroll right over. And the only one I guess I'm going to share right now is just the AWS region and secret name. So we can see here that AWS region is US East 1, so that's where the secret is located. And then the actual secret name that I have is called SMTP user credentials. I'm not going to show the email from or the SMTP variables or values, as I do want to keep that private. But you're going to see here that it's able to use that. And here we're going to go ahead and set those to these local variables. And then it's going to call this get secrets, where again we're going to be passing in the region and the secret name. And it's going to basically use that as part of the API that is used to actually extract the secret. So you can see that there is an invite not successfully sent, and that's actually expected because this is a non-existent email. So trying to send a non-existent email through AWS SES is going to basically return a negative status, which basically my app interprets that and basically displays this message here. But I wanted to show this bogus email thing just to show you that the breakpoints are getting hit with the new code, and that we're actually able to use configuration parameters instead of hard-coded variables, which does make this a better application as it was compared to what it was before. So we did the React updates to use the env configuration file, and we did use the web.xml to actually have configuration files at the global level with the environment variable entry, and then specific to the servers as well. And that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you saw, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as mentioned in the previous video, you are more than welcome to copy this web chat application code as presented. But if you want a digital copy, I do ask for a small $5 donation via Venmo or PayPal, and you can see those details in the description below. Once that's done, do message me to my email that you can see in the description below, which is ankocentral@gmail.com, and I'll send you a link to the code for the download. Once again, thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.